Let's open up the chat window as well. Okay. So last week you guys had the Fibonacci lab. Let's work on that together real quick. So for this lab, we had to ask the user for how many digits of the Fibonacci that they wanted printed out, somewhere between 3 to 5 or 3 to 20. 3 would be the minimum because the first 2 digits of the Fibonacci sequence are always 0 and 1. And then we would print out the rest. So let's go ahead and make new Java class, Fibonacci, static void main, string arts. Gotta move the zoom stuff out of the way. And we should import the stuff that we want to use. Import Java util scanner. Excuse me. So, close that. So we're going to initialize a few variables. I'm going to make an int first number equals 0. Second number equals 1. These are the first 2 digits of Fibonacci. We're also going to make previous and current. And then we should also initialize another variable called num digits. Cool. So, oh, and of course our scanner. So equals new scanner system.in. So I'm going to say while actually we'll do it this way. There's a couple ways you could do this. You could do it all within the while loop, or you could do it like this is another way you could do it too. I'll show both ways. So one way you could say is how many digits of the Fibonacci sequence series do you want printed? And then we take num digits equals sc.next int. And we're going to assume, so normally this would cause an error if they said, like if they wrote out the word 7, for instance. Obviously that would cause an issue. For our intents and purposes, we're going to assume that the user knows enough to not manually type out the number they want entered. They'll just give us a number that they'll comply with the fact that they provide us an integer. So while num digits less than or equal to 3 or num digits greater than 20, or actually, sorry, less than 3 or greater than 20, because those are our bounds, right? If they give us less than 3, a value less than 3, we don't want to print that out because those are presets. We don't want to have to deal with the special stuff. Although, I mean, it doesn't really matter. You could have it in your loop to where they wouldn't really change that much about your loop. I just had to do it this way just so you guys get some practice of compound conditions. And then we also don't want it to be greater than 20. Please provide value between 3 to 20. And then we just copy this over again, right? And this will keep repeating until they give us what we want. Perfect. So once we have gotten, and I'll put little label comments too. Get the user input, input sanitation. That's what this is usually, this kind of thing is usually called like sanitation, meaning if you want a specific kind of input from the user, you'll do some kind of sanity check to make sure it's good. And then core loop is what we're going to have next. So for int I equals 0, I is less than num digits, I plus plus. So in this while loop, we're going to, I'll say previous is equal to 0, current is equal to 1. We're going to print out the first two numbers, 0 and 1. Obviously, you could just system out print. You could just do 0, 1, and leave a space for the next number, or you could, put this way where you have let's say the first number plus the second number. That's another way you could do it, obviously, but obviously it's much neater and easier to just do it like this, since these first two numbers are always going to be 0 and 1. Anyways, actually, you don't even really need these. You could just start out with having the previous number be a 0 and the current number be a 1. So then int next is equal to previous plus current, system out print next, and then space after it. And then we increment it. So previous becomes the current equals next, and then we go to the next loop. So basically what we're doing is we're pivoting the previous and current variables every single time. So if we run this, configurations, demos, oops, labs, Fibonacci.
Sorry if this is just a random question, but why do you initialize things like that when you're asking it to run the program? Why not just right-click and tell it to run?
Oh, that's just how I've gotten used to doing it.
Okay.
So let's say we want 5 in the Fibonacci. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Whoa, what happened? Let's debug. Dangers of live coding. Before you've had coffee. Okay, I can just do unprinted. We'll say 5. 0 and 1. Oh, that's right. I know why. 0, 1. Got the 0th one, we got the first index. We should start at I equals 2. So now if we run it, it should print out 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yep. The issue was we were starting at I equals 0. We shouldn't do that. We should start at I index 2 because index 0 and 1 are always printed out, right? So that was the fix. And that is the Fibonacci lab. And we can test to make sure this thing works. Let's say we want 1 digit printed out. Please provide value between 3 and 20. Let's say 21. And if we say 20, then it'll print out up to the 20th. Any questions on this code? Nope, fairly straightforward. Okay, cool. So let's get into today's topic, which is methods.
I do have one question. Sorry,
Yeah.
I was just reading through my own
No
code
problem.
to double check something. How do you close a scanner if it's not in the same method?
So usually, let's say you're passing, that's a really good question. So, and we'll talk about that a little bit today. Let's say you're passing scanners around. We should actually close, thanks for reminding me, we should close the scanner here. Your scanner will have been initialized in one of the methods, right? with, like, let's say you have 3 methods that use the same scanner, because you should never initialize more than 1 scanner. It's bad. Here, we'll get into the methods demo, and I'll talk about that in the methods demo. Methods. So this week you guys should have learned about methods. We can talk a little bit more about what this public static void main thing means. We already I addressed it a couple weeks ago. We talked about the different parts, but let's really break down this method signature. So these are keywords. These first 2 are keywords. They tell us things about the method. Things like who is able to access the method, the public keyword. Who does, if we're writing a program with multiple classes, which classes can access it? Static is just kind of its own keyword. Static means that there exists only one instance of this across multiple instances. It doesn't matter right now because we're only working in static contexts. We're only working in everything that's static right now that we write. It's just the main method must be static. Then there's the return type, which is re for short. Then there's the name, and then the args, or the parameters, whatever you want to call it. Parameters will have a param type and then a param name that's referred to within that method. And this is the basics formula for any method signature, and you guys already knew that. When you're calling methods, so let's say I want to write a method that gives a number back, that just doubles the number, right? I'm going to say it's going to give an integer double int, and then we'll just say int x, and then it's just going to return x times 2. So we'll break this down in just a second, but if I go to call double int 4, then I'm going to get an error. Non-static method double int cannot be referenced from a static context. You're going to see this error a lot until we get to working in classes. You guys just need to always have the static keyword, because whenever a static method attempts to call another method directly, that method has to be static. When we get into classes, what you're going to be doing is you're going to have methods in a different class, and you're going to create an instance of that class within your static context. So it doesn't matter if the method within the class is static or not. You can call it no matter what, because you're working in a defined instance of a class. But again, that's something we'll get to later. For now, just know that you need the static keyword. And I mean, you could put public too if you want. It doesn't matter. You don't have multiple classes, so the access keyword really makes no difference right now. Just know that the main method always has to have the public static. Always has to be public static void main. But for your other methods, all you really need to have in there is the static keyword. And for a little while, and I'll tell you when, it's just something you need to have in there. You don't really need to understand what the word static means. Just know that you need to have it in there. Again, until we get to working in multiple classes, and at which point I'll remind you guys, hey, this is where we start taking off the training wheels of having static in there. Anyways, let's talk a little bit about the return keyword, because it is kind of interesting. Do I need to have a return type to use the return keyword in a method? What do you guys think?
Yes, we do. But I do have a question on the line 9.
You're incorrect about that, but we'll talk about it after your question. What's up?
I'm sorry. So we're talking about the questions, or we're talking about the return type?
For the return type, you do not need. It does not need to have a return type for you to use a return keyword. You can use the return keyword in a void method, but we'll get to that after. You had a question about line 9?
Yeah. So the static in, I understand this part, but why? I mean, you don't need to put a public though, right?
No,
I mean, it's a method.
Because you're working in one class, you're working in one file. There is no other people, there is no other elements within your project that are examining this method. So you don't really need the keyword. No one else is looking at this. It's just everything within this class. is looking at the keyword.
Got it.
The
Thank
access
you.
keyword, yeah. The access keyword is only used when you have
this class. Other class they can.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, again, there's a really great table, Java access keywords. If you just Google this very first link, it tells you which other classes, outside packages and stuff, can access something based on which keyword you use. And default is you don't put a keyword. So really, public and default work very similarly. The only difference is when you have multiple packages, meaning multiple folders, default doesn't allow stuff from outside your folder to look into those elements. But we'll talk about access later when we get into multiple classes and encapsulation, because that's a topic for like near the end of the semester. Just for now, know that, I mean, yeah, you can have public static if you wanted to. It's not going to hurt to have it. It's not going to hurt to not have it. But even IntelliJ will tell you access can be private, or you can leave it as default as well. That's what's nice about IntelliJ. It has these kind of like it picks up redundancies really well and reminds you. So on to what I was going to say about you don't need to have a return type. I could have a static void. I'm going to call this foo. And let's say foo is going to take a Boolean. I'll just name it B. And let's say if the Boolean is true, let me think what to do. Let's say this. Let's say we're going to get a number, another int x. And what this method is going to do is it will double the int x until it reaches 100. And obviously there are different ways to do this. You can use the break keyword in what I'm about to do, but I'm just going to make it this way. So I'm going to say while true, so it's going to be an infinite loop. X times equals x or times equals 2 because we're doubling it. And if x is greater than or equal to 100, then we return, meaning we stop. The program just stops. We don't necessarily return the int x. We've just done some process until a certain point. This method is not meant to return anything. It's just going to keep working on it until we reach our goal. And you know what? Just to further press that we're going for some kind of goal, we're going to put a system out print. We've reached our goal. Now, this is like a really contrived example because I couldn't think of a better example off the top of my head. But just know that what the return keyword means, it doesn't necessarily mean I'm returning an object to you. That might be the intuitive definition you draw. The reason why it's called return is because when you have a method, what happens in the call stack, and you'll learn about this more later, but in your code, when it's being run in the machine's brain, it creates a stack of I go to this line and this line and this line and this line. And when you go to a method, it branches off. And it says, okay, remember where we were in the program counter? I'm going to start a new stack where I'm going to process this method. And each time you call a method within a method within a method, it keeps creating a new stack. And that's how it knows how to unpack it. So when you say return, it returns you to the last counter, to the last place you were at, basically where the method got called. Now, the reason why we attach a value if we have a return type is because this method is expected that once when it finishes running, some kind of value will be given back. But return just means return to the last place that I was called. So if we call foo2 over here, then once we hit this return statement, we're going to return to this line. Does that make sense? Or did I lose some of you? And it's okay if I lost some of you. I touched on some like really higher level topics.
It made sense for the most part.
Okay. So just know that you can use the return keyword regardless of if you have a return type or not. Return simply ends the execution of the method. And so, yeah, let's talk more big picture, abstract. Why do we use methods? What are methods used for? Why do you guys think we even learn to divide up our code this way? Okay, sure, to simplify code, but be more specific. How does it simplify the code?
It makes it modular.
Yes, exactly. Jamie's on the right path too. It's cleaner. It makes it modular. It defines specific purposes to different parts of your code. You can, instead of having one big chunk of code that just, I wrote a program and here it does this and it does this and it does this, we can divide up responsibilities within our code. We can say, okay, instead of doing it all in sequence, just to make the main method easier to, or the main flow easier to follow, we're going to have different methods that break up different stuff to do. There's one method that's involved in, I don't know, like if we think about a shoe factory, there's one method that's involved in stitching the outer part of the shoe to the padding underneath. There's another method that's responsible for putting the laces through, something like that, right? That's what methods are. We're dividing up different responsibilities that a program is supposed to do. Someone had a question about scanners passing through multiple methods, and that's actually a really, really interesting question. Oops.
Well, I just was looking at the lab itself that we're having to do, and yeah.
So one thing to be aware of is you should never initialize more than one scanner. So if you should never initialize more than one scanner throughout your program, where should we have this scanner be created? Because we got to create it somewhere. So if we got to create it somewhere and there can only be one, where's the place to have it?
Either in main or someplace where you only call it once?
Yes, main is a good place. So we'll have scanner sc equals new scanner system.in over here. So for your homework today, there are going to be several times where I ask you to, you'll basically need to pass the scanner along to different methods. You'll only have one scanner to use, but other methods will need to use it because they'll need to ask for input. So let's say, let's make a program where we ask the user for their name, and then we have a method called get favorite food. And get favorite food has to ask the user for what their favorite food is, and then save it to this global variable called string favorite food, right? So I'm going to make a method, public static string get favorite food. And somewhere within here, we have to use the scanner. We have to ask them, what is your favorite food? And then we'll say favorite food is equal to scanner dot next line.
Wait, can't we just make the scanner a global variable, or no?
That is one thing you could do. You could very well do that. I want you to get used to passing objects around. So yeah, that is, this is a global variable. Why can't, hold on a second. Oh, static. That's why. Okay.
Yeah. The main reason I'm asking is because I realized that I'm calling two scanners repeatedly calling two scanners in my bank account loop.
Okay.
So I need to, so I was trying to figure out how to clean that up so it's less cumbersome.
You should never have two scanners of the input stream because that's going to mess things up. I did it before when I was in like 314 and or 340 or whatever. It got messy. You cannot have multiple scanners of the same system stream, whether it be the output or the input. It will cause issues. So
got it.
The way we fix that is by passing around the one that we have. So how do we make it so that this method, get favorite food, can access this scanner that we've created? And let's name it something different here. Instead of calling it scanner, we'll call it input, right? How can we make the scanner object named input be accessible within this method? outside other than making it a global variable? How can we do it?
I imagine we would have to turn the method into private and maybe use a setter and getter.
No, you were thinking those are different things. That is not at all related to what we have to do here. Good try though.
Oh, GG.
It's something very, very simple. It's simpler than you guys think it is.
Just put scanner as one of the arguments for get favorite food and then pass it.
Exactly. Scanner, input, and this is where the name matters. Whatever we're going to refer to as scanner in here, it could even be oobla, right? Oobla. I'd have to name it oobla over here, right? We just create it as a method. We just create it as a parameter, and whenever we call this method, and we say, oh, this actually shouldn't return public static void because it's assigning it in here. We'll say get favorite food, and we'll pass our scanner object. So it doesn't really matter that it's named something different here versus here. Don't get so students who are new to coding tend to get hung up on variable names and like, hey, why isn't this the same over here that it is over here? It doesn't have to be the same. The name is just an identifier. It's just a reference within a context. It's just for you, the reader, and you, the coder, to be able to keep track of what's what just by reading it without having to look at the declaration. So oobla is obviously like a really bad name because what the hell is an oobla? I'll just refactor that to input. And what's nice about refactor is it changes it everywhere else. That way it's a little more clear what the scanner is. It's our input scanner. So yeah, that is how you would pass scanners around. So if you have
Question.
Yes.
So understand this part, but on the line 12, what happens if you don't put a scanner that close?
You're going to leave a scanner open. It might not have an effect immediately. It might mess up future program runs. It's generally really, really good practice to close your scanners when you're done with them, so that you're no longer wasting memory on listening to an input stream.
And you only close the scanner within the main, right?
You only close the scanner in the context where you create it. So let's say the scanner was created in a different class altogether, looking down the road a little bit.
Okay.
Whatever class we created in would be. And I see in chat someone said today I learned scanner can be a parameter. Anything can be a parameter. One of the things people get hung up with in Java, I notice when they're new, is people are so astounded when you can have something that's not an integer or integer string or whatever as a method. But keep in mind, a string, so everything in Java, a quick lesson here. Everything in Java comes from classes, right? If you look at the Java library, there's all these classes. We got the scanner class, then maybe there's other classes like the string class. Those are the classes we know about that. And they have a different hierarchy. These guys have a hierarchy. The scanner class is a generalization of like, I actually don't know what it is, but it's a child of some other class. String is a child of some other class, and those are children of some other class as well. And this whole line, this whole pyramid reaches back to this very general object class, because because Java is an object-oriented language, everything in Java is an object. So meaning, even if you create custom classes, anything can be passed as a parameter because everything is an object, everything is usable. It'll make more sense as we get into classes for the end of the semester, but don't be hung up on that, like, can I use this as a parameter? If it's a thing you can use in Java, it is an object that's referenceable, you could pass it as a parameter. Anything can be a parameter.
I was wondering if this might be sidetracking, but I have sort of an implementation of sort of scanner, and I wanted to make sure this could be completely wrong, and it runs fine, but I don't know.
Go ahead. What's up?
So, can I share a screen or?
Sure. Let me.
Okay. Mind you, I'm blocking this out so you guys can't see the rest of my bank account homework, but this is just the last little bit where I have all the scanners, or the sort of the scanner classes that I built.
You should be able to share now.
Okay. Yeah, so let's see, share. Okay, so you can see it, how I have sort of the initialization of the scanner in its own class, then it calls it here, putting it into the input scanner.
Okay, real quick off the bat,
Is that wrong?
I wouldn't do it this way.
Okay. Well, the problem is she gave us predefined spacing for all of the different classes we're supposed to use. So
Well,
none of them
these
have an
are
input.
classes.
Yeah,
Right.
none of them have space for like the arguments for an input scanner, because she said this is exactly what they should have going into them or coming out of them. So since I need to be able to operate on them while they're in there,
If it
such
works,
as like changing the security question,
Gotcha.
because it doesn't take in an argument, I need to be able to do it that way. So that's where I've been sort of pounding my head against a wall when you said you could only initialize one.
I may be wrong on that. I mean, if your teacher's having you do it this way, and this
Well,
works,
no, this is my own solution to. I need to be able to do this, and I thought
right.
I didn't want to just
When you're-
repeatedly keep initializing scanners left and right randomly in each different method.
So what exactly was it that she said? You can't pass a scanner around?
Well, no, it's here. Let me pull up the freaking page. I'll stop screen sharing for 30 seconds so I can pull up the actual assignment page, and then I'll just share the entire screen.
Sure.
I had it on the other one where I was looking at our thing. Okay, here it is. So, yeah. Share screen. There. Share. So you can see right here, she has them predefined as you have to put these in, but this is where I was stumbling because it doesn't take an input. So you don't have any arguments going into it, yet you need to be able to change the question using user input to then return a value. You can't get something from nothing. So I was trying to figure out how to do this where I could call it as a variable in the function.
Yeah, if you scroll up so I can just read through the whole thing real quick.
Yeah, here.
Bank account. Write a program to perform bank operations.
Yeah. Sorry if this is derailing everything. It's a
No, it's okay. I'm
scanners
part
are-
of the classes to help you with like your 210 stuff too, so you're fine.
Yeah.
Capture input from the user, scan the class, or for the following operation. Need answer for the security question. Use a switch case to call a method that performs. Code should contain the following methods. Scroll down. And did she explicitly say you can't add different parameters to this?
Well, no, she said it must contain the following methods, and I thought changing the parameters to the method would not be calling the same method. So I thought it would get marked down for that.
I mean, there's nothing to say that just because it contains those methods, you can't pass a string into it or something. Keep scrolling down.
Okay. This is just the inputs. This is just the display input stuff. So tells you sort of the order of operations for it. How to actually tell what the valid input is. But it doesn't say anything about the scanner system.
So that's something to ask the professor about. You could just create a scanner globally within the file, and that will be fine.
Okay. I've just been told that global variables are usually a bad idea, so I was trying to avoid them.
Not
but
always. They have their place in object-oriented programming.
Yeah, I guess I'll just initialize a global scanner and then just call it that way.
Well, I might be wrong on that actually, because I know there's some object-oriented people who just absolutely hate global variables, but with certain classes and stuff, it makes sense.
You see why I'm sort of...
Yeah, talk to your professor about that, because I'm not, from the sheet, I'm not understanding what she's trying to have you do exactly, like what she's thinking. If she's having you...
I mean, it runs fine.
Yeah, if she wants the constraint to be that you can't
change the
you can't change the parameters of the signature, then that's another issue entirely. But
yeah,
I don't know what to tell you. That's
yeah. You see why I'm sort of
because
stuck.
I mean, maybe newer versions of Java have fixed this because when this error happened to me, it was like an older version of Java, and I just
Well,
remember
it seems to be running fine, and I haven't run into any issues.
if it runs, it runs.
I mean,
I might be completely wrong about the you can't
Yeah.
have multiple scanners thing.
well,
So
the main thing that I'm doing is it's all the same scanner calling from the same static input, so it's not calling multiple instances of it, which might also be it.
Oh, that could be it because you're all in static. Maybe that's why it works because it's just the same instance.
It's just it's just re-referencing it, and that's why I thought this worked relatively well, is because
That's
it's still
actually a really
allowing me to
good question.
close it.
That's
with a
actually a really, really deep question. What happens when you call new from a static context?
Do you want me to run debugger and see?
Oh no, I'm gonna just look at it myself, Java. What happens when you
Okay.
use new keyword and static method? Percentage of the class. Yeah, that's interesting. I'll have to play around with that on my own sometime.
Yeah.
If it works, I mean, ultimately, if it works, it works.
It runs fine. I'm trying to make sure I'm not making like mistakes in my code that will bite me in the rear later. So
Okay, this is something I notice a lot in younger coders. You're gonna make mistakes. Your code's gonna come back to bite you in the ass. Something is gonna go wrong somewhere, and you're gonna pull your hair out trying to figure it out. Like over here, I have a project for my hardware class where I have to use an ultrasonic sensor to gauge the distance between the sensor and an object. And last night, I was using it's written in C, and I was using the timestamp method in C, which is in seconds, and my time delta kept coming out to being 0, and it threw the whole equation off, so the distance always came out at 0. And it was biting me in the ass, like changing different parts of the code and trying to figure out what the hell's going on. Then I realized the problem is that I'm using seconds. This whole process happens in microseconds, which is like millionths of a second.
So you need a fragment of it.
Right. So I used the microsecond methods, and then it suddenly worked. But that's what I'm saying. Like,
yeah,
coding is frustration. Software is frustration. You're gonna make mistakes. Your code's gonna come back to bite you in the ass later. Certain things that you thought were genius are gonna turn out to be really just stupid later on. You're gonna make these mistakes, and you have to make them. Otherwise, you're never gonna learn. I see a lot of people send me questions of like, well, what if I do this? What if I do this? Like, you have a run button. You can do it.
Yeah.
If you submit it and I don't like your implementation, I will leave you remarks on why I don't like it and why I think it's bad and why I took the points off.
Yeah.
Don't worry about the points. This class does not reminder that this class is a pass is a credit no credit class. So
yeah,
it doesn't matter if you have a C or an A. It's all going to be the same on your GPA. So this is one class where you can get really bad grades consistently in your labs, but at least you're learning stuff. You know, you're never going to learn if you don't make mistakes and if people don't point out your mistakes to you. So.
Yeah, I was just making sure that I wasn't making like a really big mistake with how I was handling this.
When you make a really big mistake, you'll know because it'll be very apparent.
Yeah, I was just afraid that it might have like some sort of weird overflow exception or some other weird issue later on.
Yeah, usually IntelliJ in particular is pretty good about catching those, preventing it from getting out to the rest of your system. You're not really working. Okay, so quick computer lesson for all you guys. There's different levels to the computer. There is what's called the kernel level, which is the base operating system level. And what you guys are right now, you're in user space, not in kernel space. Kernel space is where you want to be careful because you might mess up things regarding your operating system, and you might have to perform a clean boot. But because you guys aren't working in kernel space, a lot of your mistakes aren't going to mess up your computer or cause some catastrophic failure.
Well, I wasn't really worried about my computer failing. I was worried that if I ran it for too long, the program itself would crash.
Sure. And if it crashes, so what? That's what I'm trying to say. Like, there's nothing to be scared of, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Just make the mistakes. Do them.
Okay. I just try to make sure that my stuff's reliable. I guess that's coming from sort of my previous degree that I was working on before I swapped over, which was engineering, which was always make sure you have a measure of safety by X amount.
Yeah,
And that
no,
seems to have sort of carried over into my coding philosophy.
I get you. It's different here. I mean, you can make, because everything's in a digital environment, you can make mistakes.
Yeah, which I really do need to take to heart a little bit because I seem to be a little overly cautious with some
It's
of the
not just
stuff.
you.
So.
Everyone does it. I can't tell you how many. And again, like, this is not just Alex, but literally everyone in the class. Like, so many people like message me, ask me questions like, "Is it okay if I do it this way? Is it okay if I do it that way?" Like, just try it. You have a run button. You don't need my sign off for everything. And when you submit a lab and I give you feedback, you're gonna know. So, and speaking of, sorry, I haven't given feedback on labs in a while. I have been a little bit busy and just trying to get everything under control. Spring break is usually when I catch up on a lot of the labs. Usually the game labs are the game projects I'm pretty diligent about giving you guys quick feedback. This weekend, I'm going to be grinding away at your milestone zeros, giving you feedback on those.
I thought those were
due today.
No, they're due next week because we're on section 6, not section 4. Or chapter 6, not chapter 4. In the timeline, it says... Yeah.
It is due... Well, for section 2, it's due in an hour and 14 minutes, but for you guys, it was due today.
Really?
I put out multiple reminders in the Discord that it was due today.
I didn't see that. The problem is my Discord's been sort of crap for me for some reason, so I haven't been checking it.
Yeah.
Seriously? Oh, that pisses me off because I was looking at the sections at the bottom where each one was talking about it. And it says we're discussing milestone 0 and talking about milestone 1.
Discussing it as in like discussing it after the fact, that like.
Yes, I now understand that. Reading it, I didn't understand that that's what we were sort of talking about it that way.
It's okay. You can still turn it in late. It'll be fine. You should still do it. Milestone 0 will help out a lot, but
I understand that. It's just frustrating because it's like it's not to get after you, but it's just I feel it's a little disjointed in how it's organized because I look at the schedule list for where things are, not sort of going up to the top and double checking, oh, is this due? Because I can't easily check these things.
Turn it
sort of jumping around.
I can see the argument for that, and you do have a point that it is different from the rest of the class. My point is I don't think it takes that much effort to click into the submission and look. But all that aside, we're not going to get to a big fight. If you turn
I'm not arguing with you.
You're not arguing.
I'll get the grade with whatever I get.
What
I'm just pissed off at myself, mostly, just because I try to stay on top of all this crap, and this one came up from behind me, and I missed it because I was expecting it to be due next week, not this week.
Nobody's perfect. I mean, hell, even this project that I'm working on here is due tonight. I didn't know about it until yesterday because I hadn't checked the iLearn for a while. Another class, so it happens.
I can definitely understand that.
We all make mistakes.
Yeah.
It is no big deal.
Yeah, I'll try to get it in by the end of this weekend, I think.
Yeah, you're good. Okay.
Yeah.
So, you are all good, buddy. All right. Today's lab is an expression evaluator. It's kind of a silly little lab. You're basically making a mini calculator. But the thing that I mainly wanted to talk about with that is using GitHub. For this lab, I will assign 10 extra points if you submit this thing through GitHub rather than submitting your direct Java file. The way that works is you click on this link right here. What's this? There are people pinging me on Discord. I'm going to go ahead and GND. Okay. You click on, not this, we close this. You click on this link and it opens up GitHub Classroom. There we go. It'll have like a little button for you to say like accept this assignment. And once when you do, it'll say, hold on, we're pulling this assignment for you. Once when you're done, just click this link and you're going to be taken to this page. This is a generic, this is just like the generic template that I'm going to be using for all your Java assignments, because you're going to be writing your own code and putting it in. There's not really any pre-made code. For most things, there's no pre-made code that I have for you. So to kind of go over how we do this, right now we have a repository in the remote. Our repository is technically empty, but that's okay. By the way, there's a git ignore file in here. You don't have to worry about that. GitHub doesn't like having empty directories, so I have to put a git ignore file in there. Don't worry too much about the git ignore files right now. You don't need to know about them. But what we do, we have this repository in the remote. Where do we work on things? If this is kind of like a more advanced question, but if anyone remembers from last week, right? We have our remote repositories. They exist in GitHub. What do we have to do to work on them? Can anybody remember? Right now we have code that exists in the cloud. If we want to work on that code, what should we do you guys think? You don't have to use specific GitHub terms, but just general concepts. If something exists in the cloud and we want to work on that file on our computers, what do we have to do? If there's a document in Dropbox and we want to work on it, what do?
We download it.
Right, we download it to our local machine.
Yeah.
And I'm accentuating these terms because this is stuff that I want you guys to kind of start internalizing. In GitHub, that's called cloning. So we have this URL here. We're going to click on this little symbol to copy it. And you can also, as I said, you can use GitHub Desktop. You can also download it as a zip. I prefer to use the git clone method. I'm going to make a new terminal window. And I'm going to cd desktop, meaning I go to my desktop. And I'm going to say git clone, and I'm going to paste that link in here. Say enter. And then when I go to my desktop, it should be there somewhere. What is it called? Lab 6. There it is, Lab 6, Expression Evaluator. There's all the files in here. I want to open this up in my IntelliJ. So I just go to IntelliJ, open. All right, so I go to imports. Import settings, no. Yeah, we're gonna open a project. And I go to my desktop. I hate the stupid Zoom menu thing. And then Lab 6, and we say open. And we'll open up a new window. And just like that, we have our Java project open here, and I can make a new class called main, let's say. And then it's going to ask me, do you want to add this file to Git? So now what's really cool about IntelliJ, it has integrations with GitHub. So whenever you're making changes in your local, you need to add stuff to commits and push those commits to GitHub. That is how your changes in your local get pushed out to GitHub in the remote. So whenever you create a new file, project SDK is not defined. Oh, we'll get to that here in a second. I didn't realize that was an error. Whenever you push out stuff to the remote, you need to add the file first if you make a new file. So you'll say add, and it'll manually add it to your next commit. When it's green, it means it's put into the commit, but it hasn't been pushed yet. And we'll just use Java 12. If you have that error, just say setup SDK and choose the version of Java you want to use. So I'm going to make a public static main string args, and I'm just going to make a simple hello world program, right? Let's say I've finished, let's say this was the homework assignment and I'm done. I've written everything I need to do. Now I need to push this to GitHub because this is still not in GitHub yet. If I go to GitHub, if I go back to my GitHub and I go to the source folder, there's nothing in here yet. It's still exactly as I got it. So for me to push it, I click this little green check mark. It says commit. and I want to leave a commit. And when you come to this window, it's going to have a bunch of files that you can push. The folders in the files in the .idea folder, you can ignore. These are just stuff for IntelliJ on its own, in and of itself. You can push these, but it also, you don't necessarily know if other people are going to be using IntelliJ or not, who download this. But anyways, here's the file that I'm adding, main.java. I'm just going to say I finished the project. We'll say final commit. Usually commit messages, you want to keep them short, and commits should be small, meaning each commit should be like one specific functionality. So technically in this commit, I wouldn't put in, maybe I'll have one commit where I'm like syncing IntelliJ files. I have one commit there. And then I'll do another commit as well. And this is just finished project. Okay. And I'll commit that. So right now I have 2 commits ready to get pushed out. You can have as many commits as you want, but you do need to push them. So we say update project. I've never used this. I've always used the git push command, but I'm just looking at it here. No, I think, no, this should be like from remote to local. So then when you're done here, you just go to your terminal, make sure you CD into the lab 6 folder. You need to be inside of this directory in your, this needs to be your working directory inside of your terminal. You can review some basic Linux commands. And I think the GitHub desktop app will allow you to push as well. I'm not sure because I don't use it, but that's something you guys can look at and ping with me with questions if you have. And I just say git push. And it's going to take my 2 commits, put them into my remote. So if we go back to GitHub and I refresh this, now I see my main.java here. And if we go into .idea, see we have the other commit here, which we also pushed in the .idea folder for syncing the IntelliJ files. That should really be the basics of all you need to know for GitHub right now. I'm not going to get into branching. Right now, you guys are going to be working on one branch. I will be checking the timestamps here of when your commits are. So let's say you submit your let's say you submit your GitHub link before the due date for this assignment, but you do make commits later. Normally, I would take off points for that. For this one, I'm not gonna because you guys are still learning. But technically, that would be considered late because you made changes to your code after the deadline. Any questions so far? I know this was a lot of new stuff, a lot of different stuff for a lot of you. The basic thing is all your commits, whenever you make changes, you can stage those changes to be pushed through IntelliJ. But then the actual pushing of them, you're going to have to either use the terminal or the GitHub desktop app. So any questions? Yeah.
Yes. So can you show, so let's say you finish this coding, this is your project.
Okay.
Can you show you how do you upload this to the GitHub again? I was just lost right there.
Sure. I'm going to make a change. Some change. Right. We made some changes. Now, interestingly enough, when a file already, you can also go by the colors here. Green means the file is only in the remote and there's changes. It needs, or yeah, green means it's staged for a commit in the remote, in the local, but it doesn't exist in the remote. When it's blue, it means this exists in the remote, but it's different from, like what you have locally is different from what exists in GitHub in the remote. So anyways, let's say I made some more changes, right, to my code. I click this check mark to commit it, to stage the change to get pushed. Added a comment. I click commit. When I click commit, we've left a comment on what the changes are. It's prepared to get pushed out, but it still exists only in my local machine, in my computer. To make it go out to the remote, I need to make sure that in my terminal, I've gone into the directory. I've gone into the actual directory where the project is. And then I say git push and it pushes it out. Do I have the GitHub app? I do. I can also show, let's try to show from the GitHub app. I've never used this in years. Existing repository. So we go here. This is our repository. Let's say some more changes. Okay. And I say git commit, added another comment. There should be, yeah, see, it shows up here. You have one local commit waiting to be pushed to GitHub. Will it show me what that stage change is? I don't know. Oh, it doesn't show me what it is. That's annoying, but you can still push it. I mean, you shouldn't need to see it because you know what's in it already because you just push the commit from here. But the desktop app just lets you know when there's stuff. And then whenever you want to pull from the remote, let's say you make some changes on a different machine. Is there a class we need to join for GitHub, or do we just click links for each assignment? No, you just I'll put out the assignment links for each assignment, and you guys will pull that. But I mean, if you're not used to the terminal, use the desktop app. It's totally fine for what you guys are doing. A lot of what you guys do will be fine in the desktop app. And especially since you're working solo, there's not a big problem using the desktop app. Problems arise when teams have like a member that uses, like some members that use the desktop app, some members that don't. Because then the way that it does stuff between the desktop app and the terminal is a little bit different. And you might run into issues here, weird issues here and there. So it's better that when you're in a team environment, everybody's working from the same context. But yeah. Yes, each time there's going to be a new repository for each, just like how you create a new project for every single assignment in IntelliJ. Each time you have a new assignment for this class, there's going to be a new repository. You're going to have to clone it to your local. And you can also, I believe, clone stuff from here. You can say add clone repository, and you can look for some repository that you have, or you could just paste that URL into here, and then you can choose where it's going to be locally, where to save that repository. Don't create, so like let's say you have a new assignment. Let's put the link here, right? Let's say we have this link here. Don't just go to your documents and say documents. It'll append the rest of it for you. You don't need to create a new folder within that place. Yeah. But yeah, that's how it works. You can use the GitHub desktop app, which is a lot more intuitive for someone who's new. And in fact, if you don't know how to use the terminal and you're completely new to all of this, maybe use the desktop app instead. But I encourage you guys, as you get more comfortable with it, wean off the desktop app and move towards the terminal. But totally okay to start with the desktop app. It makes things much easier to understand, and it's much more of an intuitive thing while you get to the hang of what is a commit, what is a push, what are branches, etc. It eliminates the whole like you having to learn Unix at the same time. Any questions? And obviously this will all be in the recording. So if you guys are lost, you can always review the recording. So yeah, if you submit your, when you're done and you're going to the submission, what you need to do is copy this link. And I'm a teacher, so I can't submit, but in your submissions, it'll say upload a file or put a link. Just put the link in of your GitHub repository, and that's it. That's all you have to do. And you get 10 points extra credit for doing it that way. For this lab, for future labs, obviously, that's going to be just how you submit is going to be through GitHub. But for probably this lab and maybe one more lab, I'll have the GitHub be optional, but by the time we get to milestone 1 is when you guys start. I think we start milestone 1 next week or the week after. Yeah, next week we start milestone 1. So next week for milestone 1, you guys are going to be expected to submit everything as you finish up milestone 1. It's going to be submitted via GitHub. Any questions so far on GitHub or what we talked about today with methods? Any questions on anything? I'm going to open up the floor. Yeah.
So what if you coded it in a non-git in the clone? If you didn't code it in the cloned repository and you want to put it in there, should I just create a new file and then copy the code over?
That is
Is that
one
the
way you
easiest way
could
of
do
doing
it. The other thing you can do, this requires a little bit more work, but what you can do, let's say you had and this is where I would use the terminal. Let's say, go back to my desktop, let's go to my documents folder, CD projects, project. Let's say I had a directory here. I'm going to just make one now. Make directory demo. Okay. I'm in the demo folder. Let's say I had a file here, main.java, and public class main, public static void main, string args, system out, println, hello world. Okay, right. Let's say I worked on my code here in this directory. This is my IntelliJ directory, and I want to push this to GitHub. What I would do is I would say git init, and let me look up what the commands were. GitHub sets local to remote. Nope, that's not it. Adding a remote. Yeah, you would say git remote add origin, and that's where you'd paste the copied URL. And this sets up a new remote to pull from. Okay. So I would say git remote add origin, and I would come in here, copy this, paste that. I'm not going to do it because I don't want that to mess with my repos going to the local, but that's how you would do it. And then from there, you would just sync your files up. So if you do it that way, you're going to run into some issues. You might run into some issues with merging. That's going to make things more complicated for you. I'm happy to work with you separately on issues you guys have in that. If you have questions about the GitHub, if you run into issues, please use the GitHub discussion channel specifically for GitHub stuff. And I'll work with you guys to help you through the problems. It's going to be a lot easier on you if you just clone it locally to a new repository and just copy paste your code, over in here.
Yeah, that's what I was going to do, I think, just because, yeah.
It's too much the other way around.
It's a bit of a mess the other way around.
Yeah, a little bit, yeah.
Yeah. Though, then again, some of the largest pieces of software we use are kind of janky at the base. I mean, take a look at Linux.
It gets very messy very quickly.
Yeah.
That's the problem with software. It gets very
I remember
big and
reading I remember reading a story of like a few years back when one of the vital components of Linux failed because there was one guy in Iceland who was keeping it up to date for everyone. Mm-hmm. And he just abandoned the project because he was sick and tired of getting no like money or anything else from it. And he's just like, I'm done with this. I'm exhausted. And then because everything else was built on top of it, the whole thing collapsed.
Yeah.
Until they rebuilt it.
Again, I go in the hardware class again. You have to there's certain interfaces you have to use to make when you set up wirings to your microcomputer, you need some interface to contact those registries in the computer on the kernel level. So there exists for Raspberry Pi specifically, someone created a library called Wiring Pi, which for C makes it much, much easier and straightforward to access the wirings and set up your input-output slots. But then he abandoned the project, so the code base is slowly disappearing from the internet. You can still use it, but he's not supporting it anymore, and like the repo, the website where he had it with the repo is gone. So it's literally now, if you want the source code, you have to hunt it down. It's not an uncommon problem in software of people abandoning a free support project that they did and everyone's stuff falling apart because of it. It's very, very common.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing is how a lot of companies make money is they take something that's free, slap a label on it, and sell it as a product.
I mean, that's why people abandon these products. Like, I'm not getting paid for this, and this is a lot of work. So,
yeah,
marketplace of ideas, right?
Exactly. Anyways, yeah.
Any other questions for GitHub? Like I said, guys, if you're confused by the terminal, and I know a lot of you in the chat are, don't worry about the terminal. Use the desktop app. You can move on to the terminal later when you get the fundamentals of Git down a bit more. Any questions about the lab or we didn't really go over it actually, maybe we should go over the lab. So you guys are going to be creating an expression evaluator. Essentially, you're going to ask the user for two operands, which are the numbers that are going to be doing stuff together, and then the operator, which defines what these two numbers will be doing. So, for instance, here's like the formula, right? You're going to output stuff with operand, operator, operand equals result. There's a few requirements here. You should have these methods. You'll have a method for each mathematical operation, including power. And I'm going to make this a requirement. Note, for the power function, you cannot use math.pow. I want you guys to practice using loops. Assume you will never get power less than 0. So assume that it's always going to be a whole number, right? It's always going to be a power to the 1, to the 3, to the 10, whatever. But you're not going to have to worry about like square roots or cube roots, etc. So yeah, you guys are going to have to create something that performs the arithmetic operations for everything, adding, subtracting, multiplying, dividing, and then power. You're going to have a method called getResultText, which will return a two-operand operator and calculate the result and format it into a string. So it's going to be returning a string. And then you're going to have another method in there called isValidOperator. Before you perform any operation, you check if the operator that the user gave you is valid. So here's some examples here. Your operator, and these should give you some clues about what data type to make your operands, right? Here we're going to enter an operator, checking if the operator is a valid operator, and if it is, great. Here's an example where nuts is not a valid operator, and then if they give you an invalid operator, just end the program. You don't have to keep it going. In fact, the program only runs once. If they want to run it again, they'll have to restart the program. Should be fairly straightforward. Shouldn't be too hard for you guys. Really, the biggest thing here is you guys writing methods. Any questions? Okay. If there's no questions, then that's it for the day. Good luck, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.